The following program has been rated GE by the Kenya Film Classification Board. It is therefore suitable for general family viewing.
Hello viewer, welcome to Chungu cha Jamii. I'm your host Eunice Mugo. Today we're going to talk about how to raise an autistic child. Do you have an autistic child? Do you know a friend, a sister, a neighbor who is raising an autistic child? What are the challenges? What are the difficulties? Send in your question, your comments across all our social media networks. That's GBS TV Africa. Our SMS line is 21144. I'm not alone. I have a guest with me who is going to help us to understand better about autism in children. I will allow her to introduce herself. Welcome, guest.
Thank you. My name is Felicity Nyamburangongo. I am the founder of Autism Society of Kenya. I'm also a grandmother of somebody who is affected by the spectrum of autism, who is now a grown man. Andrew is 40 plus. That's my grandson. Hence, the foundation of Autism Society of Kenya.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Felicity. Welcome on the show. Today, as we talk about how to raise an autistic child, now that you've mentioned you being a founder of founder of Autism Society of Kenya, having a grandson who is autistic, how was it for you and the parent of your grandchild bringing him up? At that time, I believe that autism was not something that people were well conversant with. How was it bringing him up?
Well, it was not easy for the parents because nobody knew about autism. Not here in Kenya, so they tried and they went around all the hospitals. So eventually I decided to step in and find out exactly what the problem is. And so I went to several hospitals, and eventually I was able to connect with an expert from Gertrude Children's Home. He was a visiting professor, Professor Forbes. He used to visit on Fridays. He would come to Gertrude Children's Hospital. And I was introduced to him by a lady in Nairobi Hospital because they didn't know what the problem was. So I visited Professor Forbes. And for the first time, he's the one who told me that Andrew was affected by the spectrum of autism. And it was very, very difficult because we were looking for medication to calm Andrew down. He was hyperactive, he was aggressive, he was, well, you can mention it. And already he was over 14. So it was very, very difficult. But according to Professor Forbes, he said, he told us that autism is not a disease, it is a spectrum. It is something that you can manage through processes. It's nothing to do with medicine, because these are the people who have a neurodevelopmental disorder, and therefore he told us that he was going to back to England that evening, and then he would get information, an appropriate information, and then he would send us the information. So I insisted, and I said we were not going home because I was told that you are the one who can help. Andrew has not been sleeping. Andrew has been everywhere, and he is destructive. And he said, okay. I said I needed medicine. He gave me 3 pills and he said, okay, you go home, feed him. and give him one pill. If he doesn't sleep in the next 5 hours, give him the second one. If even after the second one he doesn't sleep, then what you need to do is throw the third one away and forget about medicine. Medicine does not work. It doesn't calm anybody who is affected by the spectrum down. That's what happened during that visit. And that is exactly what happened. I went home, tried the medication, it did not work. Now, Professor Forbes had gone for 2 weeks. So we needed to wait, but we didn't wait because we got contact in the United States. And that was after getting in touch with my son, who is a Microsoft engineer. And we were able to get a lot of information from the United States. So we did not wait for the 3 weeks. So this is where our source was. And we learned that the best way of calming a child with this within autism spectrum disorder, not autistic. Mind you, there are people who have hyperactivity, but not necessarily affected by autism spectrum disorder. So we need a pediatrician, a trained pediatrician, and we have them now in Kenya to find out exactly what the problem is. So we don't want to mix up the spectrum of autism with others.
Allow me to interrupt you.
Now, it is from the United States that I learned that you can actually handle anybody affected by the spectrum of autism through dietary intervention, because they are affected mostly by what they eat. There are certain foods that affect them, therefore hence the hyperactivity and aggression.
Allow me to interrupt you, Madam Felicity. My question would be, now that interacting and getting to learn about how you became a founder of the Autism Society of Kenya because of your grandchild, you mentioned by the time you're meeting this professor, your grandson was 14 years old. Now, my question would be, when
he was past 14.
He was past 14 years old. Now, my question would be, at this past 14 years old, is it does a child get born with this autism spectrum, or is it something that develops later, or it differs depending with a child? How is it?
Well, my understanding, this is the information I got from the United States. These people are actually affected by the spectrum of autism during the mother's pregnancy. That information is an information that we got, and apparently they are born with it. But so the more they stay and continue eating the affected the foods that have certain substances, that is what makes them worse. And you start noticing that this child is different from the others. In fact, if you brought a baby that is about 1.5 years, I would be able to say, yes, this child is probably on the autism spectrum disorder. But at 2 years is when we start noticing that the child is nonverbal, hyperactive, and aggressive.
Thank you so much. Another question would be, now that you have identified this child has the autism spectrum, and for the case of your grandson, allow me to put him on the spot today, but for at that time, given that he was past 14 years, before getting to identify that he had autism and getting to know as a family that the son is affected by autism, how was his education before getting to know that he is autistic, and now after you've already identified as a family that he is autistic? How was it, the education process?
Issues of autism for these children is impossible. Unless the child is under management, like Andrew. The parents had taken him to so many special schools, but nothing worked. Because these children are unable to stay calm. They will not sit still. So if a child has this aggression, you cannot take them through education, and therefore, despite the fact that Andrew had gone to several special schools which were available at that particular time, none of them helped. He didn't get much help from the schools because it's not about schooling. For a child to be able to study, and they have to sit still and they have to have listening skills. Now, this child who is hyperactive and aggressive, surely, how do you get them to get education? But I want to say this, that by the time Andrew was about 12 years, he was verbal. He would speak. But after 12 years, he stopped talking. He abandoned the speech. He didn't speak anymore.
And how was it communicating now with Andrew? Now that you mentioned by the time he was 12 years, he used to have speech, and after 12 years, he abandoned speech. How was it communicating to him? And also, to add on to that question, different children who are affected by the autism spectrum, from research has that they have different talents. One may be good, and we call them geniuses, maybe in mathematics, in science, in music, in art. There is just that one special aspect that you find in an autistic child, that they excel very well in it, even without much struggle. For Andrew, in this case, what is his his uniqueness in this, let's say, maths or the science or the art?
That is a very difficult question because issues of the specific children with autism being specialists in maths or science and etc. They have to be issues of hyperactivity and aggression have to be addressed first so that they calm down. Yes, they have skills, but you cannot talk about skills, especially when a child is over 14. It is impossible. If they are over 14, I understand. I don't know. I'm not a scientist. But my very long experience with children within autism spectrum disorder, you will find that I don't use autistic children. I find persons within autism spectrum disorder. Despite the fact that they have special skills, you have to start the management of this child as early as about 2 years, 2.5 years. You have to find out what is this, how can you stop this aggression? How can you make them calm? How can you make them sit down? And the best thing is to stop certain foodstuffs. Yes.
Maybe you can help us to understand these foodstuffs that affect the autistic child, and what are the required foods that will help them now to be able to calm their hyperactivities and to check out on their dietaries.
First of all, people like people in Kenya have they will feed the child with the mumbled milk. Mumbled milk have casein, which is which makes these children, which makes them aggressive. So they put their children on mumbled milk.
Mm-hmm.
Now that is one of the substances that actually is offensive to a person who is affected by autism spectrum disorder.
Mm-hmm.
Because I understand, apparently they have an inability to secrete digestive enzymes, and therefore it is impossible for them to break the substances of mammal milk, that is cow, goat, and also camel milk.
Mm-hmm.
So once you start now feeding your child at a very early stage, you understand that there are some people who put their children on this mammal milk before they are even 6 months. So this child cannot be helped. There are also certain fruits which affect the children. And so these are things that are known. We have a book on feeding an autistic child, which is available at the Autism Society of Kenya, and which tells you exactly what is offensive and what is not offensive. And again, we Autism Society, when I say it's Autism Society of Kenya had formed the parent supporting groups, almost all over Kenya. And we actually were able to talk to the parents about these issues of feeding the child, that the child would be best not put on these certain foods which will make them aggressive. And you will find that this is a spectrum that was not available in Kenya. Like when I was growing up, which is I don't want to mention the years, but you can tell. You probably can tell from my appearance. I never met anybody. There was nobody with autism at that particular time.
Very
Because
true.
you were put on your mother's milk. After 2 or 3 years, you are done. Now people nowadays don't breastfeed their children.
Very true.
And again, we changed in our feeding processes.
Thank you so much
Yes.
for the insight that you're sharing with us. I believe that our viewer today is going to take home a very credible information about how to raise an autistic child. Viewer, I hope you're learning as much as I am about how to raise an autistic child. Send in your comment, your question across all our social media networks. That's GBS TV Africa, or SMS line is 21144. We'll be back shortly.